The Titanic was really a cover for a highly classified military operation.
Why would the search for a passenger liner in the mid-1980s demand some of the most advanced undersea technology of the era, at a cost of millions of dollars and the coordination of a highly trained oceanographic team? Curiosity? Science? Well, on the surface, it seemed a mission of historical curiosity. To locate the RMS Titanic, the ill-fated luxury liner that sank in 1912 and captured the world's imagination. Yet, far more was at stake. The expedition was helmed by Robert Ballard, a pioneering oceanographer who, years later, before he died, admitted what he found at the wreck and the true nature of his expedition. This is one story you don't want to miss. Let's get started. Ballard's expedition. In the spring of 1985, Robert Ballard, an American oceanographer whose career had already been marked by groundbreaking deep-sea explorations, embarked on what would become one of the most celebrated discoveries of the 20th century: the wreck of the RMS Titanic. Ballard's approach to deep-sea exploration was revolutionary. At the heart of this search was Argo, a towed underwater camera sled designed to navigate the crushing depths of the North Atlantic while transmitting real-time video to surface vessels. Unlike previous deep-sea submersibles, which relied heavily on direct contact with the sea floor or the ship's remains, Argo allowed Ballard and his team to map vast swathes of the ocean floor remotely, identifying subtle anomalies in topography and material that might indicate human activity. This technological innovation was crucial because it enabled exploration at a depth of approximately 12,500 feet, a zone where pressures exceed 5,500 pounds per square inch. Temperatures hover near freezing, and visibility is limited to the faint illumination provided by the sled's floodlights. But why go through all of this trouble for locating the wreck of the Titanic? After all those years? Well, Ballard revealed the secret later in life. For now, let's continue with the story. At the time, most expeditions assumed that finding the ship itself, a nearly 2.5-hour-long wreck spanning 882 feet, was the only path to discovery. Instead, Ballard proposed a deceptively simple but profoundly effective idea: locate the debris field first. He hypothesized that when the Titanic broke apart during its descent, it scattered thousands of tons of material ranging from personal belongings to lifeboats and sections of the hull across a wide swath of the ocean floor. By tracing these smaller fragments, which would drift and settle more predictably than the massive hull, Ballard believed his team could effectively reverse engineer the location of the main wreckage. Rather than plunging blindly into the abyss in search of a singular target, the expedition systematically followed a trail of debris. The Titanic itself, whose tragic sinking on April 15, 1912, has become synonymous with human hubris and technological optimism, had become an obsession of sorts. The ship, operated by the White Star Line and en route from Southampton to New York City, struck an iceberg at 11:40 p.m. and sank in the early hours of the morning, taking with it more than 1,500 lives out of the 2,224 passengers and crew aboard. At the time, the Titanic was the largest and most luxurious vessel ever constructed, epitomizing the Edwardian era's faith in human engineering. Its loss shocked the world, and in the decades that followed, the event inspired an enduring fascination, spawning books, films, and scholarly studies exploring not only the disaster itself, but its broader social, technological, and cultural implications. Despite this enduring fascination, locating the Titanic had proven extraordinarily difficult. Early efforts, beginning in the 1960s, were hampered by limited technology, extreme oceanic conditions, and a lack of precise historical data regarding the ship's final resting coordinates. Expeditions led by the likes of Dr. William Beebe and Jacques Cousteau relied on deep-sea submersibles such as the French Archimede and the American Alvin. Yet these missions produced only scattered sonar readings or ambiguous photographs. A new hope. By the early 1980s, it was widely accepted that the Titanic's location might remain a mystery indefinitely, hidden in the dark expanses of the North Atlantic nearly 400 miles southeast of Newfoundland. When minor debris, such as lifeboats, iceboxes, and personal effects, was occasionally recovered by commercial salvage operations, these finds were often treated as tantalizing fragments rather than definitive evidence of the wreck's whereabouts. Ballard's expedition also reflected the growing integration of technology and interdisciplinary science into undersea archaeology. His use of Argo, in conjunction with side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, exemplified how engineering, marine geology, and historical research could converge in a single mission. Side-scan sonar allowed the team to create detailed maps of the seafloor, identifying potential anomalies in shape or density, while ROVs could be deployed to capture close-up visual verification. By combining these approaches, Ballard's team could sift through thousands of square kilometers of ocean floor efficiently, a feat that would have been impossible with earlier manned submersibles alone. Furthermore, the expedition highlighted how methodological rigor and careful planning could compensate for the inherent unpredictability of oceanic conditions. Public interest in the Titanic's fate reached a fever pitch during the lead-up to Ballard's 1985 mission. Media coverage of previous expeditions often sensationalized near misses and speculative sonar images, but Ballard's mission promised tangible results. His team conducted the Titanic search aboard the research vessel Nor, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Equipped with sophisticated computing systems for real-time data analysis, the Nor served as both command center and laboratory, allowing Ballard and his colleagues to process sonar readings, video feeds, and oceanographic measurements simultaneously. The expedition's meticulous planning included careful modeling of the iceberg collision site, current patterns, and the expected dispersion of debris based on hydrodynamic simulations. In addition, historical archives, such as passenger accounts, ship logs, and ice patrol reports, were painstakingly studied to refine the search grid. These historical data points, when integrated with cutting-edge technology, enabled Ballard to narrow down the probable locations of the Titanic's debris field to a manageable search area. By late September 1985, the expedition began deploying Argo along the predicted path of debris. The sled's high-intensity lights illuminated previously unseen sections of the ocean floor, revealing a surreal landscape where twisted metal, personal items, and fragmented sections of the ship's structure lay scattered across the abyssal plain. Among the first notable discoveries were sections of the hull plating, coal, and porcelain fixtures, objects that had drifted away from the main wreckage. Each sighting was transmitted in real time to the Nor, where Ballard and his team could adjust search patterns dynamically, following promising leads and refining the grid with each successive pass. This incremental approach allowed the expedition to map hundreds of meters of debris at a time, creating a visual and spatial understanding of how the Titanic had fragmented during its final plunge. The debris field, ultimately extending over a mile in length, became a roadmap guiding the team to the primary wreckage. On September 1st, 1985, Ballard's expedition achieved its historic breakthrough. Approximately 370 miles south-southeast of Newfoundland, at a depth of 12,500 feet, Argo transmitted live images of the Titanic's hull, split into two major sections, resting on the ocean floor. The bow, largely intact, rose steeply from the seabed, while the stern lay broken and partially collapsed at some distance, confirming long-standing theories about the ship's breakup during descent. The discovery validated Ballard's unconventional strategy of using debris as a guide rather than seeking the ship directly, and it demonstrated the effectiveness of combining historical research, advanced technology, and logical deduction in extreme environments. Beyond the immediate media spectacle, The find had significant implications for the field of marine archaeology, illustrating how human ingenuity could overcome natural barriers to exploration and establishing new standards for the study of submerged cultural heritage. Ballard's discovery also had a lasting impact outside the realm of historical exploration. The methodologies developed for the Titanic search, particularly the use of remotely operated camera systems and debris-focused search strategies, were subsequently adapted for a variety of purposes, from locating sunken military vessels to studying deep-sea hydrothermal vents and ecological systems. For instance, techniques refined during the expedition informed later searches for the German battleship Bismarck and the USS Yorktown, as well as mapping projects in the Mariana Trench and the hydrocarbon-rich continental shelves off the coast of Africa and South America. The expedition demonstrated that the ocean floor could be surveyed systematically with a combination of technological precision and strategic insight, a principle that continues to underpin modern oceanography, environmental monitoring, and even undersea rescue operations. Moreover, the public fascination with the Titanic, amplified by Ballard's breakthrough, paved the way for documentaries, educational programs, and museum exhibits that blend historical narrative with scientific exploration, thereby inspiring a generation of oceanographers and engineers to pursue careers in deep-sea research. Discovery of the Titanic. On September 1, 1985, Robert Ballard and his team successfully located the wreck of the RMS Titanic in the North Atlantic. Positioned roughly 370 miles south-southeast of Newfoundland, Canada, the Titanic rested at an astonishing depth of 12,600 feet, a zone where pressures reach over 5,500 pounds per square inch, and temperatures hover near 1.8 degrees Celsius. The wreck revealed a scene of both tragedy and scientific intrigue. The ship had broken into two main sections during its final plunge. The bow, remarkably intact despite the crushing pressures and decades of corrosion, rose steeply from the seabed, its forward section containing the remains of cargo holds, crew quarters, and the anchor mechanisms. The stern, by contrast, lay twisted and partially collapsed, reflecting the violent stresses endured during descent and impact with the ocean floor. Between these two massive sections, an extensive debris field extended over a mile, scattered with thousands of artifacts ranging from coal and wooden furniture to delicate porcelain and personal belongings. This distribution confirmed Ballard's hypothesis that the most practical approach to locating the Titanic was not to search for the ship's hull directly, but rather to trace the patterns of scattered wreckage. Among the most compelling features identified during the expedition were the remnants of the ship's bridge and grand staircase. The bridge, where Captain Edward Smith and his officers had managed Titanic's final moments, retained identifiable structural elements despite being largely eroded by decades of corrosion and the activity of deep-sea bacteria such as Halomonas titanicae, which feed on iron and steel. These bacteria had accelerated the deterioration of the hull and other metallic structures, yet key elements remained sufficiently preserved to allow detailed documentation. The grand staircase, a symbol of the Titanic's luxury, was partially collapsed but still contained recognizable architectural features, including ornate wooden banisters and decorative ironwork. The broader debris field revealed an extraordinary array of artifacts that collectively illustrated life aboard the Titanic in its final moments. Personal belongings, including shoes, handbags, clothing fragments, and luggage, were dispersed throughout the seafloor landscape, intermingled with mechanical equipment such as boilers, engine parts, and sections of the propeller shafts. Lifeboats and davits were found scattered in proximity to the main sections, along with remnants of cargo, including wooden crates and metal containers whose contents had partially survived the decades underwater. The ship had captured the global imagination not only because of the scale of the disaster, but also because of its symbolic resonance as a technological marvel undone by human hubris. The recovery of its remains provided concrete evidence of how the ship sank, validating or challenging various hypotheses about the nature of its breakup, the speed at which compartments flooded, and the efficacy of lifeboat deployment. It also gave scholars a direct connection to material culture from the Edwardian period, allowing detailed study of personal artifacts, maritime equipment, and design practices that had previously been inferred from archival sources alone. Ballard's expedition also had a lasting impact on subsequent deep-sea missions. The strategies and technologies refined during the Titanic search were adapted to locate other historically significant wrecks, such as the German battleship Bismarck in the 1980s and the USS Yorktown in the 1990s, as well as for ecological studies of hydrothermal vent communities and deep ocean biodiversity. The application of remotely operated vehicles and high-resolution sonar mapping became standard practice, demonstrating that a combination of technological innovation, strategic planning, and interdisciplinary collaboration could overcome challenges previously thought insurmountable. The findings from the wreck also yielded practical lessons about long-term material degradation under extreme oceanic conditions. The identification of Halomonas titanicae and other corrosion-promoting organisms provided critical insight into the rates at which steel and iron structures deteriorate in the deep ocean. These observations informed conservation strategies for shipwrecks and submerged cultural heritage sites worldwide, influencing protocols for monitoring and preserving maritime artifacts in situ. Ballard's team carefully documented both structural and organic degradation processes, creating a baseline for future studies of corrosion, biofouling, and sediment interaction in deep-sea environments. But wait, didn't Ballard say there was more to the whole story? Well, yes. Only part of Ballard's mission was actually made public at the time. The hidden reality. Unbeknownst to the public at the time, Robert Ballard's expedition was partially a cover for a secret US Navy project. The Navy was interested in deep ocean technology, strategic surveillance, and sensitive recovery operations during the Cold War. The Titanic search offered the perfect pretext to deploy advanced undersea equipment, map vast ocean floor expanses, and test remote exploration systems in extreme environments. But why was the Navy funding the Titanic expedition? Well, their actual objective was to investigate two lost nuclear-powered submarines, USS Thresher, which sank on April 10, 1963, and USS Scorpion, lost on May 22, 1968. Both submarines, designed during the height of Cold War tensions, carried nuclear reactors and highly sensitive technology critical to US strategic capabilities. The Navy did not want to publicize these findings, but to locate the wreckage of the submarines, map their debris fields, and assess the condition of their nuclear reactors and onboard systems. Such information was essential to understand the causes of catastrophic submarine failures, improve safety protocols, and ensure that sensitive technology did not pose environmental or security risks. The depth and remoteness of the submarine wrecks presented challenges similar to those posed by the Titanic. Thus, the latter also became an effective cover story. The Navy provided Ballard with substantial funding and imposed strict operational conditions. The expedition, conducted from the research vessel Nor, required top-tier oceanographic equipment, including Argo, the remotely operated towed underwater camera sled, capable of transmitting high-resolution video to the surface over miles of ocean. Additionally, the Navy mandated secrecy regarding the dual-purpose mission. The Titanic search offered a compelling public narrative that justified the expedition's cost, which sat at around $14 million, while concealing the sensitive military operations. Ballard's innovative approach to deep-sea exploration, particularly the strategy of locating debris fields first rather than the primary target, was applicable to both the Titanic and the lost submarines. By mapping scattered fragments and following patterns of wreckage, Ballard's team could locate targets too large, remote, or hazardous for direct human inspection. The use of Argo and other remotely operated vehicles enabled the collection of data on underwater topography, structural collapse patterns, and material composition without exposing crew members to the extreme pressures of deep-sea environments. Moreover, the integration of side-scan sonar with historical and technical records allowed Ballard to define search grids efficiently, reducing operational risk and cost. The methodologies developed for the Titanic proved directly transferable to mapping debris fields of the nuclear submarines. Ballard himself did not speak openly about his role in the submarine surveys until decades later, when the mission was declassified. Once the secrecy was lifted, it became clear that his work provided the US Navy with a wealth of information about the condition of both wrecks and the risks they posed. At the site of the USS Thresher, lying in about 8,400 feet of water east of Cape Cod, Ballard's team documented how the submarine had imploded under immense pressure as it sank below its crush depth. The wreck was not a single piece, but scattered across the seafloor in thousands of fragments. Large sections of the hull were mangled and twisted, and debris covered an area of about 134,000 square meters. The nuclear reactor section was located and appeared to be buried within debris, but Argo's cameras showed no signs of radiation leakage at the time. The USS Scorpion, resting nearly 10,000 feet down southwest of the Azores, was in even worse condition. Ballard's survey confirmed what the Navy had long suspected. The submarine had suffered a catastrophic implosion. The hull had collapsed violently, and the wreckage was strewn across the seabed in a long debris trail. Unlike the Thresher, which sank during trials, Scorpion was an active combat submarine when it was lost, and its wreck included torpedoes and sensitive equipment. Ballard's team observed that some parts of the hull had telescoped inward, a hallmark of a high-pressure implosion. They also documented that the debris field stretched for hundreds of yards, giving clues to the submarine's final moments as it spiraled downward. Again, while there were concerns about radioactive material from the reactor, Ballard reported no visible evidence of leakage during the survey. Thus, the story of the Titanic's discovery is inseparable from the broader context of Cold War geopolitics, technological advancement, and dual-use scientific operations. Ballard's expedition illustrates the capacity for a single mission to produce layered outcomes, revealing the long-lost remains of the Titanic, providing invaluable insights into human history and maritime archaeology, and simultaneously supporting secret Navy objectives related to the safety and assessment of nuclear submarines. The mission's success reflected both the genius of Ballard's methodology and the broader strategic imperatives of the era. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.